All right, here we are, guys. Part 3 of the engine install on this 2017 3.5 liter Ecoboost engine. As you can see behind us there, we have the engine installed, everything attached. Now we're ready to take that body and bring it on down. Button up the engine compartment and we'll start it up at the end of this video. Let's get to it. Okay, so a quick walk around before we put the body back down onto the frame. As you can see, everything is pretty darn complete in here, basically the same way we took it out. All the harnesses are laying over, the master's laying over, all our fuel connections, exhaust connections, and everything back here. It's all done up real nice. So we're definitely ready for the body at this point. Went ahead and put the wool wax all the way back on top of the frame and the inaccessible areas like the customer requested. And then another shop can hit the rest of it from down below on a lift at a later date. We had that ground on there, flattened out. Everything worked out with the engine. I mean, it's down in there. He was underneath there, my son, right?
Yep.
And there's tons of clearance, right?
Yeah, no problems.
No problems mating up to the bell housing and the trans, nothing. So I really think it's just that one little ground bolt not being compatible that would make them say, you know what, for 17s, you need to swap stuff over. So everything you can see is back together. All mated up real nice on here. So we're ready for the body. Everything's kind of out of the way. We'll set the lower down slowly and get it back down onto the frame here. It's all sprayed up, ready to go. Let's do it. All right, guys, I have you set up here so you can see all the action. So we're gonna go ahead and just get to it. So again, you're gonna lower it down. I'm gonna find my inspection light, my new 2000 lumen Milwaukee light I just bought. Thing is unbelievable. So go ahead, let's bring it down closer and then we'll start doing our checks and making sure we're clearing everything on here. I mean, I have the wheels chocked on both sides. We never rolled the chassis anywhere. We're gonna need to start watching it in the rear there first. So you watch in the front, I'll watch back here, make sure we're still good. It's nice to see this thing come back down finally. So we're perfectly straight back here. Inch or so of clearance. So go for it. Evap line I do not care about. I think the compressor we're going to leave up top for right now. Stop. All right, keep going. Good in the back. I'll keep working this trans range sensor out of the way, this shift cable. All right, stop. That should fall naturally down and out of the way. This stuff is out of the way. Let me take a look around. We should be connecting that. We should be connecting the shutters, no? Or is that totally accessible later on? That big long, where's the big long one at? It's tucked right there. Yeah, don't forget about that. If it's easier now, let's do it now. You know, if it's gonna make it over, there's some slack in the lines. So we can get it in, clipped in. All the way.
First pins are, wait a second.
Where's the electrical grease? I don't think it's seeping in there all the way. It's all dirty. So if you guys ever having any issues with electrical connectors, especially in a vehicle like this, where it's, go ahead, put it on there. Electrical connectors where it's, you try and push them together and they're dry and the rubber in there is dry, or they have a lot of dust in there, of course, blow them out. But also you can use the XG12 electrical grease from Motorcraft, and it'll just make everything lubricated, and especially that seal, and it'll slide right together and click like that. No problem. You have a positive click, you know it's secure. Otherwise, I mean, I'm not a small guy. Pushing together, even I couldn't get them to click. A little grease on there, you just heard it click just fine. All right, retainer, and the last one will be later, right? Got it. Well, at least it's in that one for the jumper. Over here, that's for the motor for it, and that one's for the other side. So these trans lines are definitely have some flex to them. This harness I'm not worried about. Let me check this side because I haven't been over here. I mean, you keep going. There's a lot of room around these engines on this generation. A lot of room. Well, 15 and newer. There's a lot of room around the engines. Let me look real quick. The lower hose is just fine. Body stuff is fine. Steering shaft harness. The engine's of course way clear of it. AC still sitting here. Trans cooler lines are okay. There we go. Cooler's staying there. Harnesses are staying there. AC lines are staying for now. Go ahead. I mean, we're clear at this point. It's very gentle as you touch.
It's touching now.
Okay, make sure you don't yank it down with the straps on there.
Yeah.
And our body looks aligned. It's got a beautiful alignment with the bed on there. Absolutely beautiful, because it never moved. So as you saw there, it was much easier to drop it back down. Everything's in clear view and everything's folded over and out of the way. Whereas when we're pulling it off, we kind of throw everything on top of each other, and then they kind of go up and they start hanging up on each other, going up. But coming back down, everything's kind of relaxed, and you just make sure everything's clear, you didn't forget anything, and you can just lay it on down. And if you didn't move the chassis or the body for whatever reason, when you put it back on, you look at it, you look down the side, everything's perfect too. So this is a sanctioned, approved procedure from Ford to do it this way with the body like this. It's all nice and sprayed in there. Great. So at this point we're contacting, right?
Yeah, I saw the frame, the suspension.
That one's not
start to lower.
contacting.
Maybe a little bit more. It was starting to contact though.
Okay, well at this point, we need to pull the ratchet straps off. Release them at least. Release tension on them. Tons of room in here. So basically once we get some of the engine compartment back together and the body bolted on, all that kind of stuff, and we actually lift the whole vehicle up in the air, we'll show some more close-ups of the oil pan, how it clears and everything's just fine in there, and how it bolts up to the trans bell housing just fine, and stuff like that. And then at the very end, we'll show you a startup on here, see how it runs, maybe take a test drive, stuff like that. All right, guys, we're in the home stretch. So yesterday we dropped the body down, then we took off for the day. So today I came in, bolted it up, and we did everything down below as far as bell housing, bolts, starter, flex plate, nuts, all that good stuff underneath there. Now we're vacuum filling the cooling system on here. So we're at negative 27 right now, so 27 inches of vacuum. And this is very important to do. You want to vacuum fill whenever you put in a new engine like this, because it's dry. So you want to make sure that all the passages inside there get filled with coolant upon first startup, so there's no hot spots and damage to the engine. So a vacuum fill is a way to go on that. So we're at 27 inches of vacuum. We'll let that sit for a little bit. And what this will do is it's like a pre-check to make sure we didn't miss any cooling connections anywhere, any hoses. I mean, on these newer vehicles, there's tons of hoses everywhere for the start-stop system, you know, and the heater hoses. And you just look in the front here at all the different hoses that are down inside of here. There's so many of them that you literally need to sit there and really plan out how you're going to route them and get them in there, because there's so many and it's so clogged up in the front here to make sure it all fits in there and fits properly. Nothing's rubbing on each other, stuff like that. So I came in today and put all the engine compartment stuff back together. We're still holding vacuum. Engine oil is filled. Belts are on. We need to make sure we pull the fuse for the fuel system so we can crank it for a while and get it priming in the oil system there. So I think we're pretty good. We're going to vacuum fill this in a second here. After all that work, I only have 2 extra nuts out of this whole job. No, I have no idea where these go. I didn't pull this engine apart personally. You can tell the dust on there. They're obviously from the underside there. Probably something to do with the bumper, because the bumper's not on. My son's going to come in and put that on. You can see all the nuts and everything for that. He can do that. This guy wants driveline services. He can do that. And then these 2 nuts right here for the engine appearance cover. Got our cap here once we're filled. So we just had the 2 extra nuts, and I'm sure he'll know where they go as soon as he comes in. Something down here, I'm sure. So I think we are good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and vacuum fill the cooling system right now. And then we're gonna go ahead and crank it for a while with that fuse pulled, let the oil system prime, and then we'll fire it. See, the fuel system is dry, high, and low. But right there, we've got a good crank going though for oil. Oiling of the turbo, stuff like that. I mean, it shoots to it right away anyways, but still. Yeah, there's pressure now. Sounds great. Sounds really good. I'll leave the jump pack on for now. It'll equalize out on there a little bit. Sounds good though. A little louder on this side from the fuel pump, high pressure fuel pump. Everything sounds good. I mean, there initially we had the cranking issue, but then we also had the issue with the fuel system. Everything's new. Low and high pressure are new, so it takes a while for the crank and prime and shoot to actually shoot fuel and start. So all that's totally to be expected except for the battery issue. Sounds good. Real good, actually. So you see it smoking now. And again, whenever you do any kind of major engine work, like I do timing jobs a lot of times, the oil gets splashed onto the manifolds and all that stuff. Smoking like this, It's perfectly normal. You're always going to have some of that going on there. And we have all new turbos and manifolds, and everything's coated in oil so that it doesn't rot by the time you pull out a box. And guess what? Now it's time to burn off. Kind of like a new, engine, or not new engine, a new oven. I used to install, appliances, and whenever you, start it up for the first time, a grill, an oven, whatever, it's going to have that issue where it stinks and smokes like that. Pretty standard. But it's running. Sounds great. So I think we're good to go. Back on the road, this thing goes. Real quick, guys, I want to address two noises this engine was having upon startup. So, of course, we had the battery issue, and then we had the fuel issue, so it wasn't running perfect upon initial start because the fuel system was dry and all that stuff. But once it was running and sitting there idling like this, you may have heard this noise. And that is the PCV. And they all do that. All the brown ones seem to do that. So that's perfectly normal. It is new. And then when it first started, sitting there idling initially, that's why I let it idle. I did not rev the engine. When it first started, there was a sizable tapping going on over here by the high pressure fuel pump. And the fuel pump makes noise compared to the other side, but it shouldn't be too loud. So the tapping on a new engine like this, it's all new, it's going to be the lash adjusters pumping up. And that happens when you put new ones in just about any engine. You need to let the engine idle initially, like I did here, and let them pump up all the way. Let them fill all the way, get the air out, all that stuff. And that's what happened. I let it sit here, hot idle, while I'm cleaning up, ready to take off, and now listen to the engine. PCV, of course. So after about 10 minutes or so, they're pumped up on here. You can see most of the burning off is done on here. We got the PCV noise, but that's not going to go away, unfortunately. That's just how all the brown ones are. But that's one of the things you guys got to understand when you're putting an engine in like this, or let's say you rebuilt an engine and you put in all new lash adjusters and stuff like that. You're going to have noises like this upon startup until actually everything fills up, pressurizes, and bleeds out, even in the oiling system. So don't freak out. Experience tells me not to freak out. You got to let it idle. That's how they fill. And sure enough, everything's great. Everything's just gravy on here. So now that it's running and all that good stuff, we're of course going to see if the battery is toasting this thing or not. I'll check charging system tomorrow or Monday. But the next thing you need to do, and I'll show you guys before the test drive, is we need to learn the misfire profile correction of this engine with the scan tool, or else misfires and stuff like that can happen on the engine when there's no reason for them. It'll create its own misfires because it's not reading the crank right. So I'll show you guys that. It's a very important step whenever you're replacing just about anything having to do with the crankshaft. So a new engine, dampener, trigger, anything like that. When you pull and separate the transmission, change the flex plate, anything to do with that, you change the trigger wheel, crank sensor, any of that stuff, you want to relearn the misfire profile correction, or else you're going to have ghost misfires. So I'll show you guys that before the test drive at the end of this video. Real quick, guys, while the vehicle is back up in the air for some driveline services, let's talk about that aluminum oil pan. So if you guys didn't see the first video in the series, basically Ford said the engine that you're getting is the latest version of the second gen Ecoboost, and the oil pan is not compatible with the 2017 model year vehicles. If you have a 2017 like we do, they want us to take the old stiffener and plastic lower pan and pickup all together from the old engine and swap it over to this one. I said, wait a second, why is that? How could it not mate up to the bell housing? They're all 10R80s, etc., etc. So I'm happy to report that the original pan that comes on here, it's sealed up perfectly. You know, the all aluminum one-piecers that don't leak, does work, so you don't need to take it off of there. And of course, since they built it at the factory, that engine, to match this pan, it already has the proper pickup on it inside of there. So we just left it alone, didn't touch anything. So it matches up perfectly around the outside here. All your bell housing bolts down here on the side, and on this side, go into it just fine. Everything's good to go there. There's no clearance issues with the cross member or the front axle on here. You can see there's plenty of room. Like I said, the front axle is standard all these years since basically '09. So everything works on there. Plenty of clearance, looks beautiful, and it's never gonna leak like the two-piecer would about maybe a year or two from now. It's just the way the design is. So the biggest changes that I noticed on here that maybe is why Ford's like, yeah, it's not compatible, don't use it, you gotta swap the old junk over, is simply because on some models, the transcooler lines do push fastener into the side of the pan. That's not really doing much because it bolts into the front of the engine and back here for support, which is really doing all the work. So this one does not have any push fasteners on the side, but some models I know do. Again, it's not an issue. The other one is the power wires coming down to the starter. So it has a little push pin right here that used to push into the side of the pan. But again, you really don't need that. And if you really wanted to, you could put it back, zip tie it through one of those holes and make it secure and make you feel all warm and fuzzy. But it's not needed. It's a nice stiff cable. It's out in the open. It already has memory to it. It's not going anywhere. And that way it can't rub on anything and chafe. So it's better off just leave it like this. Again, it's attached back here at the starter, and then there's a retainer in the front by the front cover of the engine. And then the one other issue that we knew early on was up in here. If I can get you up in here, you can see the ground on the side of the block there. You see it right there? It had a little tang on it, which could not be used in this pan, so we just flattened the tang out on it, a locating tang, and then it bolts up on there, same as the old two-piece style pan. Same bolt threads, same everything. So the ground's still there and attached, no big deal. You just need to bend the tang straight. So that is it. Otherwise, it fits in here perfectly, and I'm glad I stepped back for a second and I said, wait a second, let me see if I can keep this one piece around here for my customer, because I know, just like the first gens, the one-piece pans do not leak. I think it has something to do with the block also being aluminum, same expansion rates, and it's a lot better. Bigger flange on there, broader sealing surface, etc. They just don't leak, and this one won't either. So it is compatible. I want to give you a good heads up on that, so you guys can decide for yourself if you're changing out your engine on your early model trucks. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna complete the driveline services on here. We'll go for a ride, reset that profile correction on there, and see how this thing runs.
What?
We figured out the extra nuts, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I did.
Yeah, I'm getting old, I guess. So I went, that one of the first things I did was put the master on, and couldn't find the nuts for it. These didn't seem to thread on there. They look like they're way too small, although they'll make sense. So I grabbed from my Ford bin some Ford flange nuts, perfect size, M8 by 1.25, no problem. And I put it on. So we have extra nuts and 2 nuts missing, but I already tried threading it on there. I guess I was too tired on Sunday working on it.
Yeah, I tried it.
Then he comes over,
Worked just fine.
because he pulled all this apart, and I said, you're gonna figure it out where these go before the vehicle leaves. He goes, hey, guy, did you even try? You see, because of the tip on there, it's a little weird going on. And they appear like the thread was too big for the nut. Sure enough, that's them. Same style flange nut as what I put on there. But hey, we're gonna go through and put them back on there. That's the way to do it. Mystery solved though, right?
Yep.
Good thing you're around.
Yep.
Okay, now that the engine's been running fine and idling a little bit in the bay, you know, kind of clearing the air bubbles out and stuff like that in the fuel system, what I'll do is I'll go in before our test drive and do a cam reset on here, which basically force clears any learned values from the old engine and from startup with this new engine. So now that everything's cleared out and it should be running properly, you want to start off fresh. So I went ahead and cleared that. You know, we cleaned the throttle body. We did all kinds of stuff to this engine. So now it's going to learn all these new parameters for throttle control angle and stuff like that. Fuel trims, all that good stuff. So we'll go ahead, now that that's done, and we will, the most important one is relearning the misfire profile correction on here, which is basically a forced relearn of the characteristics of the trigger wheel on the crankshaft. On this vehicle, it's in the very rear. It's a little trigger wheel. It gets strapped onto the flex plate. So basically, we're going to force it to learn right now in a controlled environment. So it'll stabilize the RPM. It'll make sure it's a certain temperature. And then we're going to go through. So basically, I'm going to rev it so we get past this point right here. And then I let off, and as it's coming down, it's gonna learn. Kind of the same thing in the old days. You used to drive the vehicle to 60 miles an hour, let off the accelerator, let it coast down to 40, and that whole time it's learning the misfire profile correction. Here it's a more intricate setup on here. So we'll rev it. As it goes down, it learns. When it's coming down, it's way more controlled. There, good to go. So at this point, it's saving the information right now. Basically, they don't want you, disconnecting the battery or anything like that, because it needs time to save it into there, and now we're good to go. If you don't do this, it can cause ghost misfires and cause a lot of issues. A lot of issues. The first time I experienced that was way back in the day when all this first came out. I didn't know about it. I changed one of the first Ecoboost engines in a 4-cylinder Fusion, and changed it out. It was an enterprise car. They blew it, of course, rental car, and I changed it out. Everything was done very meticulously with a brand new engine because it was still a current model year, and the thing came back like a week later with crazy misfires all over the place, random, for no reason at all. And the reason being was that it needed to relearn the misfire profile correction. It causes ghost misfires. That woman did not look happy. So it's very important on these newer engines to learn that. And now we're just going for a drive so we can learn the shift points, and we can heat it up and clear out the rest of the air bubbles in the fuel system and stuff like that. Get the engine nice and hot a couple times, let it pressurize and sit, that kind of stuff. Hot soak, stuff like that. Really test the cooling system integrity in general. We can make sure the heat is coming out the vents here, all that good stuff, just from cruising around, sipping your coffee, and going for a drive. Tell you, this job is not too hard. Got some major construction going on over here, so I may dip you a little bit here because I gotta concentrate on these guys. I'm working hard out here in the weather. Need to pay attention. Major construction going on here. We're back out into the country now. But yeah, we're just gonna go for a ride and make sure everything is good to go. We did driveline services on this vehicle, and I feel so bad for this guy. He's got 200K on here just about, but the trans had this fine slurry of aluminum in it. I didn't see any brass. I didn't see any actual hard steel, chunks in there, not like that. But it was a fine slurry of aluminum, which, you know, is to be expected to an extent. That's why you do pan drops and fluid services throughout the life of the trans. Get that stuff out of there because it does affect the valves and all that stuff. But I mean, either it wasn't changing 200,000 miles or there's something else going on there. I let them know. But for right now, you guys can't tell it, but I can. It's shifting like a dream. So we have new fluid in there, new filter, everything all cleaned up, renews the additive package, and we're good to go. So now we're learning both the trans and the engine shift points on here. Just go for a ride. Probably the best part of a job is when you go through and do so much work like we did on this one, replace so many things that were neglected or whatever else, and then you go for a ride and the thing is just a dream. It's like during the summer when you go through and you do a major AC repair and you're just sweating in the shop, you know, dying, and then you get it done. And now it's time for testing of the AC system. You go for that drive, it's nice and cool, get a bottle of water, maybe get your coffee, and you go for a drive. It's one of the best parts of the job. Yeah, so everything's good to go on here. And that'll conclude the engine replacement saga, I guess you could call it, of this 2017 F-150. Thanks for coming along, guys, on the journey and on the test drive. I'll see you guys next time.